Hi guys, it's Brad here. Welcome back to another one of my Planner Project videos. In this one I'm going to be creating the login UI for my application. So I'm not going to be doing any of the C# code just because that will take way too long, as well as actually writing up the markup for this. But I will be doing that in the next video. So first thing first, we're just going to hop into Adobe XD, where I've drawn up my designs for what I want the login screen to look like. So that being said, let's hop to it. So here I am in Adobe XD. As you can see, I've got up the design that I made a couple of days ago for how I want the login page to look like. So as you see, I'm going for a dark design with a red accent, just to feel red really stands out. So I've got quite a large size, quite simple. So I've got a couple of circles here. Inside of them, I'm going to have some icons going in them. So maybe like a padlock in there, a person's head in there, a key in there maybe. I've also got some hint text inside of these username and password. That's what I've done that text to kind of be. I've got a bright red button here, a red outlined button here, and just a red text close button here. I have also got some guides just so I can work out how I want this to be laid out within my application, just so that when I'm actually coding it, it's a lot simpler for me to work out, like my grid and how I do my spacing, etc. So I've put a 50 pixel border around everything. In fact, if I just add, there we go. So I've got a 50 pixel border around everything. And also to get the widths and heights of the rows and columns, if you just look there and there, see, it shows me my heights and width. Sorry, my width, and there shows me each of their individual heights. So I can do that for each of these, and it will just show me that. So now, next thing I do, I'm going to hop into Visual Studio, and we're going to get going with the actual XAML that I'm going to be writing. As you can see, I've opened up my login view. So just went into Views, Login View, and double clicked it. So now I have login view open. So the first thing you're going to notice between this login view and my design is I don't have any of the standard headers. Alright, so I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm also going to resize it first. So this window is 467 wide and 698 across. Height. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the code, and under here I'm just going to say window state, window style, and I'm just going to have none. So the window style, as you can see, that removes all this default up here. Yeah, I think Visual Studio itself does that. But let's just say let's find an application that doesn't do that. See, up here, Notepad++, this is some code that I'm going to be using later on. So Notepad++ uses the standard one, so far as I can tell. So I'm getting rid of that entirely. So now, the next thing to do is add in those height and width. So go back to the design. I have a height of 698, 698, and a width of 467. Right. So now I'm also going to have a style equals dynamic resource. But no, I don't want to be doing that there. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is get rid of this grid for now, because what I actually want to do is I want to put everything inside of it. There's a nicely formatted there's a control within material design, and it's called a card. And even though it's not meant for the purpose that I'm going to be using it, I've tried it out and it looks really nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a transparent background. Cool. Transparent. Just because I don't want to be able to see it, because the card has got a nice rounded edge, and it also has a bit of a shadow, and it's got all the visual styles that I need built into it. So what I'm going to do is I've already got the code, just because it saves me remembering all of this. So there we go. What I want is that grid, just the grid. In fact, I do not need that grid. I can just grab the card, copy it, and paste that into there. Okay. So as you can see, though, it's given us an error here. Material design card. So I actually haven't added material design into here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go XMLNS material design equals, it's that one there. Okay, so what that does is that adds the XML or the XAML schema, so that I can actually access some of the controls that are embedded inside of XML, inside of material design. So content can be set once. Right. There we go. So as you can see, it's got my card in here, and I've also got a margin. I've got a padding of 50, because if you look in my design, see I've got this edge here. This is all 50. It just means that everything isn't going to be squashed to the edges. It just gives it a nice feel. So, and I've also got the margin of 10 set so that it has a bit of edge outside of the window. And I think if I get rid of that, I'm not sure what that will look like visually. Let's just give this a go, just so you can see what it looks like. Right. But as you can see, I've got this black border. That's because by default, Windows doesn't like, WPF doesn't like to give transparent anything, as far as the window is concerned. So what I've got to do is I've actually got to allow it to have transparency. In fact, to make this more visible, there we are. So now you can see a lot more of what I'm doing. So to allow this transparent background, I've actually got to allow transparency. Okay, so there's a attribute for that inside of Windows Forms. Inside of this window here. So that's just allow transparency and set that to true. I'm also just going to remove that margin. Oh, need that space. Right. I've also set the background here to material design dark background. So what's that done is it's literally just put in a dark background that is associated with material design. Go with my primary colour. Because if I was to change this primary colour, which again was inside of my app.xaml, so I was to change it to green. And if I was to run this, actually no, it appears it doesn't associate with the primary colour. So I think that's just your standard dark theme. So that is where it gets it from this base theme here. So actually just going to reset that back to grey. So the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to want to add in all of my gridding. Okay, so that's what this code is here. So inside of the grid control, so this is just like a layout. Okay, so it allows you just to arrange things inside of a grid so that when you resize and mess with any of that, the height, the width of your window, you are going to be able to actually do stuff with it. So it will all resize automatically. So inside your grid, you've got row definitions and column definitions. So what these are, they just say how much. So each row definition says how much of the window do you want to take up. So do you want to take up a certain amount of pixels or a certain proportion of the available space. So the first row that I'm going to be adding in is this one here. So these isn't rows or columns. Okay, these are just my margin. So from here down to there, because there should be another. There we go. So from here down to here, these are my rows and columns. So my first row has got. Make sure I'm looking at the right thing. So my first row is 282 tall. So the first row is 282 tall. So 282. So the way I did that quickly was I just typed in row and then tabbed, which is just something that the Visual Studio is built in for WPF and XAML. It's just a neat snippet that it has. So the next row is 76. In fact, the next two rows are 76. So what I can do is I can just type in 76 and copy that down. Then the next two rows are also the same size as each other, but they are 71, 71, 71, and then the next one is 22. But I'm actually going to make that so it just takes up the rest of the space. Just in case my numbers were slightly incorrect, which they shouldn't be, but you know, there's always that margin of error. So, next thing I'll do is add the columns. Let's just click that. So my columns are 68 and 232. And if you don't know where I'm looking, I'm just looking, when I select this, you'll notice that there's two numbers here. See, 68 and 232. So if I just column 68 and 232, and then the next one is mirrored, so that is also going to be 68. Yeah, it says 67. It's actually 68. Or it should be 68. I think when I was designing it, I was slightly out, but like just a pixel. That shouldn't make any difference at all to how it looks. Right, so now that I've got my rows and columns in, I'm going to add in my controls. So first of all, I'm going to add in this ellipse here. So now underneath my column and row definitions, I'm going to add just a comment just to say that we're on row 0. Which will just make it easier when looking back at the code to go, right, where am I looking? I'm looking in row 0, and then you can look for each element in row 0 to find column 0, column 1, column 2. So I'm going to be adding an ellipse. It's going to be of row, let's just give it a name. Name of in fact, no, let's not give it a name. I can't think of a name. So it's row is equal, it's grid.row is equal to 0, and it's grid.column is equal to 1. Okay, so 0 row, first column. So just in the dead center there. And I'm going to give it a height equal to, see how big the thing is, 232 by 232. 232. Width is equal to 232. And it's also aligned to the top. So vertical alignment is top. Right, but you see there isn't actually there is a circle there, but when I click off it, you can't see it. That's because I need to set the stroke. Right, so the stroke is like the outline of it. So I'm going to set that to the to my accent color. So that should be maybe that one. I'm not sure what colour that might be. No. Right, what I'm going to do instead, I'm just going to call it directly, because I want it to be red. There we go. So now I've got a red there, and I'm not going to close it off like this, because I will want to put an image inside of it. So I'm going to leave it open so I can put an image in here. Don't need that. So source equals, I'm just going to leave that blank for the time being, just so that it's there. Row equals grid.row equals, in fact no, I don't need to do that because it's inside of this here. But I will set its vertical alignment to be center, and its horizontal alignment to also be center. Yes. I'm also just going to give it a margin of 50, so that when I put it in, it will automatically resize so it's in the center, but it isn't going to be too near the edges of my circle. Right, so that's our row 0. Next up, we've got our row. We've got our row 1. So inside of that, we're going to also have another one of these. In fact, I'm just going to quickly comment this out, just so that we can run it shortly without actually needing to put the images in there, just so it doesn't overcomplicate it to begin with. So I'm just going to copy this here, because I actually want the same image well, the same thing, but I'm just going to want that to be in my row 1 and my column 1, and I'm also going to want it, if you've got my design, over to the top left corner. So I've already got the vertical alignment, now I just need the horizontal alignment. I'm going to set that to left. That column needs to be 0. And I'm also going to resize it to be the right size, which is 43 by 43. 43, 43. Wonderful. So that's very in tune with what I've got going on here. Yeah. I'm also just going to get rid of these guides, just so I don't need them anymore. So I've got that there. And then next up, I'm just going to add in the username entry. So that's going to be a text box. And this one I am going to name. So I'm going to set the name to username with a capital U. And what I name this is very important. I'll explain that a little bit more later on in the video. But for now, just know that it is important. Right, if we could just close this just so I can see it. Right, so as I said, the name is very important, but I'll explain that a little bit more next video. Later on in the video. And now I'm just going to say that I want it to be in the top. And I'm also going to set the style first. Style, and that's style equals, and this is going to be another dynamic resource. So this is just how you access the resources that are called in with material design, and just also any resources that you have inside your app.xaml here. So the ones that I'm using, so this one up here, this one here, well, that I will be adding, they're called in from this line and this line. Okay, so dynamic resource, and this is going to be just a material design text box, and now I'm going to add in that vertical alignment and just set that to top. I'm also going to add the grid.row equals 1, grid.column equals 1. Just add that vertical alignment text back in. Right, so as you can see, it's like that. But in the design, that goes all the way across. That's because that's taking up that other column there. So if I just say grid.column span equals 2. So what that does is that just says how many columns does this control span. Okay, and if you're familiar with JavaScript and CSS, then you probably already know what that is. One thing that I did forget to do was set the font size for this application, or for this window, and I have that set to 20. So what that means is it's just going to be the right size for this design. Actually, I've got a little bit of padding around this control here, but I do, just so that it centers with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add that padding to the top. So just so I can get it so it looks nice. Let's do this on a new line, it's getting a bit long. Padding, margin. So the difference between padding and margin is that margin is outside of your control. Padding is how much spacing you've got inside of your control. And you can either define it in 3 ways. You can do it all around. You can do X and Y padding or margin, and you can also do it as left, top, right, bottom. So I only want it on the top, so 0 on my left. I'm going to add about 5 for now, just to see how that looks. Yes, that's looking a lot more central. I'll see that when we actually add text into it. And I think for now that's that line completely done. So I'm just going to copy this entire thing, so I want it the same but for the password box. I'm going to call this password, and then just change the row just to be the row below it. Material design password. And before, I also have these hints here, so I can actually just say hint assist material design dot hint equals, this is username and password down here. So hint assist dot hint equals password. I also just need to add in the font color. So that is a foreground. I'm just going to set that to dynamic resource and material design dark foreground. Wonderful. So now let's just quickly run this just so you can see how it looks inside of the code. That's actually inside of my application rather than the design. And voila. So that's what I've got it looking like so far. So pasting B, and what you see when I type in a password, I've now just got these dots. So that's just so you cannot see the password from inside the application. Right, next up, just got to add these buttons in. I just need to change that. I'm also just going to collapse this code up a bit, just so it's a little bit more readable. So I can just fit it all on the same screen, and it'll also allow me to keep better track of my flow. So let's just add in another comment here. This is my row 3, and I'm just going to have I'm just going to have a button. I'm going to give it a name of sign in, a style of dynamic resource, and this one I'm going to use the material design raised accent button. So what that means is it will give me a button that is red like that, and the text inside it will be white. Obviously that isn't where I want it. I want it to be in grid.row is equal to 3, grid.column is equal to 1. And this one I do not want to be stretching across. I also want it to be vertically aligned to the top, and I want to give it a height equal to that 51. Voila. Now for the content, which is content, which is just the text, I'm going to set it equal to sign in, and for some reason that hasn't set the font size correctly. I'm just going to quickly set that to 20, and that's it for the button. So even though you want your buttons to do stuff, that's all actually handled by the Caliburn.micro inside of the view model. But I'll later on explain that a little bit better, just so you can understand, or so you can see how what effect that's actually having. So I'm just going to copy this down, just because I've got another button that's got all the same properties, except for it's got a different name. So let's just add user. It's got the same height, but it's also going to have different text. So add user. It's not going to be an accent button. It's just going to be a button. But if you look at my design, I don't actually have a background for it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to have this as a flat button, and just give it a border brush. And a border thickness. Sure, no, I still need to make it raised. And I just need to set the background to transparent. In fact, I think that flat one would have worked. I just didn't give it a chance. Yeah, see, so that's got that edge around it. It's got the right colour text, and all of that jazz. So that's that button done, and then I'm also just going to copy this once more. So this row is going to be row 5. This is going to be called cancel. It's going to be a flat button, but I do not want it to have a border brush. Instead, I'm going to want its foreground to be red. I'm going to want the text to be smaller, and here I've got that text set to 17. In fact, if I font size, get rid of that line there, bring it down a row, it's pushed off the screen for some reason. Right, I also don't want it to be 51 tall. In fact, I think it's because the padding, the padding it's already got. So padding equals 0. Let's get rid of this height here. Change this to cancel. And I also don't want it to have bold text. So I'm going to say font weight equals There we are. So that is the UI done. Also, or at least the visual aspects of it and what I've got designed. So the next thing that I'm going to have to do is I'm going to now hook up the back end. So what I think to do is I'm going to leave this video here, and then I'll hook up the back end, and there's also some extra code that I've got to put in my Bootstrapper that I didn't realise I had to do until I did a bit of research yesterday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up this video here. So in the next video I'm going to be doing all of that, and also there is a bug with password boxes, with like the usual so text boxes are fine, but password boxes, they've got a little bit of funkiness to them, so I'm going to actually add in some extra code and another class to deal with that. But for now, that's the end of this video. If you liked the video, if you wouldn't mind liking it, if you're not subscribed already, subscribe if you want to, and also hit the bell icon if you want to keep up to date with my new videos. But for now, that's it, and I'll see you guys next time.